What's going on, fantasy owners? It's Thursday, another week in the books, week 2 last week, and so we're going to dive right in to the week 3 preview of the Fantasy Football Stock Report. I'm Chris, I'm back, and I'm here to help you guys win your week this week. Again, a tough week for me. Some guys didn't come through. I'll mention some of those guys in my duds list, but this is where we meant to talk about the guys that were big for us last week that helped us win our weeks. These are the studs. These are guys to watch going into this week and hopefully further on, I should say, as the season goes on. So let's jump right in on quarterbacks. Couple guys that really impressed last week. One was Christian Ponder in Minnesota. I really thought he did pretty solid against the Colts. He had a pretty decent statistic day. Went 27 of 35 for 245 yards and 2 scores. The thing of it is, though, that was kind of a tight game. And Minnesota, I think, is going to be kind of a team this year where they're going to have to play from behind a little bit in games. They've had 2 close games so far this season. Their offense can certainly put up the points because they have weapons around them. But with some tougher matchups, they're going to be behind a lot. So Punter's going to have to throw to some guys, and he has some solid weapons. Guys like Percy Harvin, Kyle Rudolph, who I mentioned last week. He's a solid number 2 going forward, but I wouldn't start him this week, though, because the Vikings have a really tough matchup with the 49ers this week, and we all know what their defense has been capable of the last few weeks and even last season. So Ponder's a solid number 2, I think, going forward, but wouldn't start him this week. Same situation for Andrew Luck in Indianapolis. Got his first win this week. It's always good to get that first win under your belt as a rookie. And a nice performance, 20 of 31 for 224 yards with the 2 scores. He's got his share of weapons too. He's, of course, got Reggie Wayne, who's one of his favorite targets. Of course, his tight end, Kobe Fleener. And even a newer guy that we're also going to talk about later in Donnie Avery. So he's got weapons. He's a solid number 2, I think, also going forward. He could be worth a look maybe as a sneaky starter next week. Jacksonville's defense isn't exactly mind-blowing impressive. They just let Houston really carve them up this past week. So maybe if you're not confident in your number 1 guy, or if you got injury troubles or whatever, maybe you look at Luck. Look at Luck as a sneaky start. He could be a guy that comes through for you against that Jags team this week. And the other quarterback I thought did really well last week was Sam Bradford of St. Louis. He's really been a nice surprise this season. He's put up solid numbers. I mean, the Rams as a whole have looked stronger on the offensive side. 26 of 35, over 300 yards, put up 310 this week with 3 touchdowns. Had the interception, but still a solid day all around. He's looked strong against the Lions and the Skins, so he's played very, very well. He's found a nice weapon in the receiving game in Danny Amendola, and a nice backup option in Brandon Gibson. It gets a little bit tougher this week, though, for Bradford. He's got to play the Bears this week, and that's a really, really tough matchup, another very strong defense. But I think going forward, if he's out there, granted he might not be owned in the majority of leagues, but if he's out there, I think he's a nice number 2 guy for your roster going forward as well. Moving on to the running backs. This first guy I'm going to talk about that probably won a lot of fantasy leagues for people last week, and that's C.J. Spiller in Buffalo. What a day. 15 carries for $123 and 2 touchdowns. In a CBS league, that's 24 fantasy points. That's huge. So obviously we knew he was going to be a big-time weapon with Fred Jackson out. He's a must start. As long as Jackson is out and he doesn't play, and we know he's going to be out a couple weeks with that injury he suffered, Spiller's a guy, and he should be a guy in your lineup every week. Another juicy matchup this week for Spiller. The Browns, who were completely torn apart by Cincinnati's offense, and Andy Dalton and Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, definitely get Spiller in your lineups this week. He's a must-start option. Cedric Benson in Green Bay, I was definitely impressed by his performance as well. It looks like they finally found a number 1 guy. 20 carries, got the bulk of the work for 81 yards. But the thing of it is, though, Green Bay really doesn't strike me. Even with James Starks, they didn't really strike me as a main running team. Aaron Rodgers is their quarterback. We know that likely Green Bay is going to pass the ball more often than not. But, Benson's still going to get a share of touches. I see him as more, though, this week kind of a number 2, number 3 guy because they're playing Seattle this week, and Seattle just completely shut down DeMarco Murray and the Dallas offense last week. So treat Benson as more of a number 2, number 3. If you don't have really any options, yeah, you can start him, but temper your expectations on Cedric Benson this week. Reggie Bush. What more can we say about what he did to the poor Oakland Raiders? I mean, he completely carved them up like a Halloween pumpkin. I mean, he just destroyed them. 26 carries for $172 and 2 touchdowns. Now, granted, this might be Bush's best game all year because we can't forget about the guy behind him in Daniel Thomas. Remember him? But certainly, Bush just completely had a field day. I got it wrong. I certainly didn't see it coming that he would just go off like this. I said sit all Dolphins running backs, but Reggie completely proved me wrong. But the thing of it is, like I said, that might be his best game because next week he's facing that Jets defense. And we all know Rex always gets that defense ready. The Jets D is always ready to play. But still, I think you can start him. I think he's still worth a start. I think he's going to get his share of the carries. I still think he's going to be the main guy. I look at him as a definite number 2, but with upside. But don't expect a big week like this again. But certainly, I think enough points, maybe at least to sneak in double digits to get you a decent week. Trent Richardson in Cleveland. The big rook finally came around. Finally had a solid week against Cincinnati last week. Even got involved in the passing game. 4 catches for 36 yards and a score there. He had 19 carries on the ground for $109 and the score. You know, the matchups aren't going to be as juicy as Cincinnati every week, but he looked every bit the part he was supposed to be. He played that role. For the Buffalo game this week, I consider him a solid number 2, definitely worth a starting look. This is a big one because this guy, I think, is also a must-start option this week. I mentioned it in my recent comment post, if you guys saw that. Andre Brown of the Giants. If you were able to get this guy off waivers, he should be in your starting lineup for tonight's game against Carolina. Ahmad Bradshaw is out. He's not going to play that neck injury, so he's been ruled out. He was ruled out yesterday. So if you got Andre Brown, this is great for your lineup. He should definitely be starting. He filled in wonderfully when he was out. 13 carries for 71 yards and a score last week. He's definitely over David Wilson. David Wilson right now is a nobody right now, completely off the fantasy radar. I think he's a sneaky start. Low number 1, high number 2. Carolina's D is weak. They had Doug Martin go off on him. They've had tons of running backs go off on him. So definitely, if you got this guy, get Andre Brown in your lineups for tonight's game. Another guy that you could possibly sneak in that filled in nicely for an injury is Daryl Richardson of St. Louis. There was kind of a head-scratcher that Steven Jackson got pulled from that game. At first, we thought it was because of the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. We didn't see him after that. But then we later found out that he had a groin issue. Well, we found out later, yesterday actually, that the groin issue is minor. It's a minor strain. But there's still some doubts about whether or not Jackson's going to play. So monitor that situation with Steven Jackson if you're a Steven Jackson owner. Hopefully you snagged Richardson off the wire. He had 15 carries for 83 yards. Had a fumble last week, but certainly filled in nicely. But that's the thing. The Rams are playing Chicago. That's a strong defense. I think either way, whoever plays Jackson, Richardson, they're more of a, I mean, obviously Jackson's going to be a better option, more of a number 2. But if Richardson goes, maybe more of a number 3 because we don't know what he's going to do yet against a tough defense like Chicago. Ben Tate of Houston did a nice job last week. Granted, I know he's nothing more than a backup to Arian Foster, but the guy still gets his share of touches. 12 carries for 74 yards with 2 touchdowns. He's kind of the red zone touchdown vulture that takes away opportunities from Foster, so Foster owners pull their hair over that. But Tate certainly, and when he's not injured, Foster is the main guy. But Tate gets work even when he's not. So he shouldn't be owned in anybody's league, but if he is, hopefully you got him, or hopefully, somebody's owned him, because he needs to be owned in all leagues. The Texans traveled Denver this week. Not a bad matchup, certainly I think Tate is, again, still in that low 2-3 category. Foster's obviously the main guy if he's not hurt, but Tate will get his work, so treat him as such for that matchup, maybe even going forward. Pierre Thomas in New Orleans. This is another head-scratcher that I kind of got wrong. I thought Darren Sproles was going to be the guy all the way around, but they're using Sproles more in the passing game than anything. He had 13 catches for a $128, but Thomas is leading the ground attack in New Orleans with 9 carries for 110 yards last week. You know, if this trend continues, Thomas could sneak in as a number 2-3 rusher with some serious upside. He should definitely be owned at this point in leagues. Definitely a guy maybe to fall back on a little bit. And if that trend continues, yeah, they're playing Kansas City this week. Could be a sneaky start to maybe like your second, third running back or your flex option if you play a flex in your league. So, but the guy behind him yet, I don't buy Mark Ingram yet. I know he got in the end zone last week. I'm not quite sold on him yet, but I am definitely sold on Pierre Thomas. One more running back to talk about, DeAngelo Williams in Carolina. Don't get too excited about him. He did have 14 carries for 69 yards and a score last week. He is the better option as long as he's healthy, but every week is not going to be like this. You still got Cam Newton who takes away rushing yards, and Jonathan Stewart behind him is still going to take away those carries as well. Against the Giants tonight, I think Williams is nothing more than number 2 guy. The Giants, yeah, the run D is terrible, but you never know with the Carolina running back situation. All right, quickly, last few guys I'm going to talk about here are the wideouts, one tight end, and a kicker for you. Wideouts, my apology of the week. I hate to say it, but I guess it's going to be a normal staple because I'm always going to get something wrong. VJack, Vincent Jackson, totally wrong. My bad. Mea culpa. I totally screwed that one up. Apparently, Josh Freeman's only weapon is VJack. I'm not sold on Mike Williams yet. Don't buy into him just yet, but I am sold all in now on Vincent Jackson. The guy went off last week for 5 catches for 128 yards and a score. He's the clear number 1 guy. He's a solid number 2, number 3, I think, for the Dallas matchup this week. Brian Hartline in Miami had a great breakout game. 9 catches for 111 yards. Tannehill has to throw the ball to somebody, and he clearly favors this guy. But unfortunately for this week, when they're playing the Jets, that might mean a trip to Revis Island if Revis plays. But if not, he's a solid number 3 with upside. I mentioned Donnie Avery. 9 catches also. Same stat line for the Colts. 9 catches for a $111. You know, the big question was who's going to catch the ball besides Wayne and Fleener. Obviously, Luck likes throwing to Donnie Avery when Austin Colley's out. We don't know if Colley's going to even come back this season yet, but he's going to be a hot commodity this week. If you got him off waivers, I think he's a decent number 3 for the Jacksonville matchup. Wes Welker. He struggled this year, still hasn't found the end zone yet, but he had 5 catches for 95 yards last week. But with Aaron Hernandez going down with that injury, I think Welker's load is only going to increase. You know, I think it's going to help him, Lloyd, Gronk, even Julian Edelman. I think you can start him this week with confidence against the Ravens. I think he's going to get more targets his way. Brandon LaFell of Carolina. I think he's a must-start tonight against the Giants. He's had 2 solid weeks in a row. It's time to buy into Brandon LaFell. 6 catches for 90 yards last week. It's crystal clear the number 2 man is in Carolina. He's probably going to shred this Giants secondary that just got shredded by Tampa and Josh Freeman. Start Brandon LaFell with confidence. I mentioned Danny Amendola. I like him going forward as well. Remember that name. He had 15 catches for 160 yards and a touch. Had a fumble too last week, but they're going to have to throw in games, the Rams are. Someone's got to be the main guy. I think he's a solid number 3, maybe even low number 2 going forward and should be owned at this point. Dennis Pitta of Baltimore. I mentioned him maybe last week as a tight end option. This is 2 straight solid weeks. 8 catches for 65 this week. I like him going forward. I think a decent number 2 against the Pats. And if you need a kicker, Blair Walsh in Minnesota. He's the guy. I think he's legit now. He had 10 points last week. This is 2 straight double-digit weeks. If he's on waivers, get him. He's going to be solid going forward. Other guys to watch but I'm not sold on just yet include Greg Little, Brandon Tate, Andrew Hawkins, Scott Chandler, Leonard Hankerson, Brandon Gibson, Jackie Battle, and Dante Rosario. Watch those guys going forward. All right, guys, that's it for the studs this week. Good luck this week in your weekly fantasy games. And if you want to check out the other videos for the duds and the injuries, check out that as well. Go for it in week 3. Hopefully a win comes your way. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the patience, and take care.